Life in the city had never been easy, but for Monica, it felt like a constant uphill battle. At 30, she was already juggling the demands of her job as a project manager at a marketing firm with the struggles of living alone in a modest one-bedroom apartment on the east side of town. The winters here were brutal. Icy winds howled through cracked window panes, and her ancient heating system groaned under the strain, often leaving her shivering through sleepless nights. Her landlord? Unreachable, of course. Every morning, she woke up to frost creeping along the edges of her windows, a stark reminder of the harsh world outside and inside her own four walls. But if the physical discomfort was bad, the emotional toll was worse. Monica's family, scattered across the same city yet light years away in terms of support, had always treated her like an afterthought. Growing up, she'd watched her older sister Diane bask in the spotlight. Better Christmas presents, more attention from their parents, Robert and Helen, and even the bigger bedroom. It wasn't just favoritism, it was neglect. While Diane flourished, Monica learned early on that her worth was measured by how little trouble she caused. And now, decades later, nothing had changed. Calls home were sparse, visits even rarer, and when they did happen, Monica always left feeling emptier than before. Her days revolved around deadlines at work, where stress piled high like snowdrifts during a blizzard. Her boss expected miracles, her colleagues relied on her expertise, and yet no one seemed to notice or care that she was barely holding herself together. Between endless emails, late-night strategy sessions, and the relentless pressure to perform, Monica found herself questioning why she bothered trying so hard. Was it pride, duty, or simply habit? Whatever it was, it kept her tethered to a life that felt increasingly suffocating. One particularly bitter evening, as another power outage plunged her apartment into darkness, Monica sat huddled under layers of blankets, staring at the flickering screen of her laptop. She thought about calling her parents, not because she needed anything, but because sometimes silence hurt more than rejection. But then again, what would be the point? They'd probably lecture her about being unprepared or criticize her inability to handle things like Diane would. Exhaustion weighed heavily on her shoulders, not just from lack of sleep, but from years of carrying burdens no one else wanted to acknowledge. The winter air was biting as I stepped out of the salon, my freshly trimmed hair framing my face in a way that made me feel almost human again. For a moment, I forgot about the stress of work, the loneliness of my apartment, and the suffocating weight of my family's indifference. But fate has a cruel sense of humor. As I walked home, admiring my reflection in shop windows, I barely noticed how slick the sidewalks had become from melting snow. That split second of distraction cost me dearly. One moment, I was walking. The next, I was airborne, my feet slipping out from under me like I was on an ice rink. I landed hard on my right side, the impact reverberating through my body like a shockwave. Pain exploded in my leg, sharp and unrelenting, stealing my breath. "Oh my God, are you okay?" A woman rushed over, her face creased with concern. I tried to stand, but the instant I put weight on my right leg, white-hot agony shot through me. "I think I hurt my leg," I gasped, clutching it instinctively. Another bystander, a man named Dave, knelt beside me. "Don't move," he said firmly. "It might be broken." Broken? The word echoed in my mind, sending a chill down my spine colder than the winter air. They called an ambulance, but it felt like hours before help arrived. In reality, it was only 15 minutes, but those 15 minutes stretched endlessly as I lay there, shivering, vulnerable, and utterly alone despite the growing crowd around me. At the hospital, the X-rays confirmed the worst, a clean break in my tibia, just below the knee. "You're going to need a cast," the doctor explained matter-of-factly, pointing to the screen where my fractured bone stared back at me like a jagged crack in glass. "And you'll be off your feet for at least 6 to 8 weeks. Then came the words that sent panic surging through me. "If this doesn't heal properly, there's a chance you could have permanent mobility issues." Permanent? My heart raced. What did that mean for my job? My independence? My already fragile sense of self-worth? Tears welled up in my eyes, not just from the physical pain, but from the overwhelming fear of what this accident might steal from me. As they fitted the heavy plaster cast onto my leg, I couldn't stop thinking about how everything seemed to conspire against me lately. Work deadlines, my crumbling family relationships, and now this. Was life trying to teach me some twisted lesson? When the nurse handed me crutches and discharged me, I realized the real battle was just beginning. How would I manage in my tiny apartment? Who would help me when even simple tasks became monumental challenges? And why did it feel like no one, not even my own family, cared enough to notice? The phone call from Diane came the next morning, sharp and relentless like a knife twisting in an open wound. "Monica," she began without so much as a hello, her voice dripping with accusation. "Greg and I are celebrating our 10th wedding anniversary. We're going to the Maldives for 2 weeks. It's a once-in-a-lifetime trip. You'll watch Tyler while we're gone." My stomach dropped. "Diane, I broke my leg yesterday," I replied, shifting painfully in bed. "I'm in a cast. I can't even walk properly." She scoffed, dismissing my injury as if it were nothing more than a paper cut. "It's not a big deal. You don't need 2 good legs to babysit. Just sit there, entertain him, cook his meals. You know he only eats home-cooked food." "Cook?" I nearly shouted, incredulous. "Diane, I can barely stand at the stove for 5 minutes without wanting to collapse. The anesthesia has worn off, and my leg feels like it's on fire." But Diane wasn't listening. Her tone turned venomous. "God, you're such an egotist. We've already booked everything. If you refuse, we'll cancel the trip. And trust me, we'll make sure everyone knows this is your fault." Her words hit me like a freight train. Cancel their dream vacation? Sue me? For what? Existing while injured. I wanted to scream, but instead, I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. "Diane, I physically cannot do this. Find someone else." But she didn't stop there. Over the next few days, the pressure mounted. My parents joined in, guilt-tripping me with accusations of selfishness. "You're ruining your sister's life," Mom scolded, her voice shrill. Every call felt like another weight pressing down on my chest. How could they expect me to care for a hyperactive 6-year-old when I could barely care for myself? The phone rang again late that night, interrupting the fragile peace I'd managed to build after shutting the door on Diane and Greg. It was my mother. "Monica," she began, her voice sharp as a blade. "How dare you embarrass your sister like that? You're ruining everything." My chest tightened. "Embarrass her? Mom, I have a broken leg. I physically can't take care of Tyler." Her tone turned icy. "You've always been selfish, Monica. This is just another excuse." My hands trembled as I gripped the phone tighter. "An excuse? Do you even hear yourself? I've spent my entire life trying to please you, to make up for whatever it is I did wrong, but nothing's ever good enough. I can't believe you're treating me like this." My voice cracked under the weight of years of unspoken pain. Tears streamed down my face, hot and uncontrollable. Her response hit me like a slap. "This is your fault, Monica. If you weren't so weak, maybe you wouldn't find yourself in these situations." Weak? The word echoed in my mind, cutting deeper than any insult before. I wanted to scream, to tell her how unfair she was being, but all I could do was choke back sobs. Then came the call I never expected. My father, who rarely spoke to me directly, decided to weigh in. His voice was cold and detached, as if he were scolding a stranger. "You should be grateful we still consider you our daughter. There are plenty of people worse off than you." Grateful? For what? For their neglect? Their constant comparisons to Diane? Their refusal to acknowledge my pain? I hung up without another word, my body shaking with anger and sorrow. How could they twist everything around until even my suffering became my fault? Sitting alone in my dimly lit apartment, I realized something. No matter how hard I tried, I would never be enough for them. And maybe that wasn't my failure, it was theirs. It was a cold, sleepless night when the fever hit me. My body felt like it was on fire, yet I couldn't stop shivering. The pain in my chest grew sharper with every breath, and I realized something was terribly wrong. I tried to call Rachel, but my hands were shaking so badly that I could barely hold my phone. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she answered. "Monica, you sound awful. What's going on?" By then, I could barely speak. I think I need help," I whispered before collapsing onto the floor. Rachel and Jess arrived within minutes, their faces pale with worry. They found me sprawled near the couch, drenched in sweat and struggling to breathe. "We're taking you to the hospital," Jess said firmly, wrapping a blanket around me. At the ER, the doctors confirmed my worst fears: pneumonia, likely caused by lying immobile for too long after my accident. As they hooked me up to IVs and oxygen, I felt a wave of shame wash over me. How had things gotten this bad? Why hadn't I asked for help sooner? While I was in the hospital, Rachel and Jess didn't just sit by my bedside. They sprang into action. They created a secret group chat called Team Monica, recruiting neighbors, co-workers, and even my barista from the local coffee shop. Within hours, a rotation schedule was set up. Someone would bring meals, another would clean my apartment, and others would visit me at the hospital to keep my spirits up. Mr. Chun, my elderly neighbor, started delivering groceries twice a week. Alicia, a college friend I hadn't seen in years, sent care packages filled with soup and books. Even Sarah, my boss, stopped by with flowers and reassurances that work would wait. When I finally returned home, weak but alive, I stepped into an apartment transformed, not just physically, but emotionally. It was spotless, warm, and smelled faintly of lavender. On the kitchen counter sat a note. "Welcome back, warrior. You're stronger than you know." Signed by everyone in the group chat. For the first time in my life, I truly understood what family meant. Blood ties didn't define loyalty or love. It was these people who showed up without hesitation, who were my real family. And as I lay in bed that night, surrounded by their kindness, I realized I wasn't alone anymore. The breaking point came one sleepless night, 3 weeks after Diane's dramatic attempt to leave Tyler at my doorstep. I sat in the dim glow of my laptop, staring at yet another hateful text from my mother. "You've ruined your sister's life. This is all your fault." My hands trembled as I read it, anger and exhaustion swirling inside me like a storm. For months, they had blamed me for everything. My broken leg, their canceled plans, even Tyler's emotional state. It was as if my existence itself was an inconvenience to them. That night, something snapped. I couldn't take it anymore. The constant guilt trips, the manipulation, the lies. One by one, I blocked their numbers: Mom, Dad, Diane, Greg. Each tap on my phone felt like cutting away a toxic vine that had been strangling me for years. But just when I thought I'd finally reclaimed some peace, chaos erupted again. A week later, I received a letter from a lawyer, not mine, but theirs. My parents were suing for custody of Tyler, accusing me of poisoning his relationship with them and disrupting their family harmony. The accusations hit me like a freight train. How dare they twist reality this way? I hadn't done anything wrong. I'd simply stood up for myself. Yet here we were, dragged into a legal battlefield over a child I wasn't even caring for. Panic set in immediately. What if they won? Would they paint me as an unfit aunt who abandoned her nephew? I hired a lawyer, pouring what little savings I had into defending myself. Every day became a blur of meetings, paperwork, and endless anxiety. Sleep eluded me. Every creak in my apartment made me jump, imagining worst-case scenarios. The trial was a nightmare. Sitting across from my parents and sister in court, I saw the cold determination in their eyes. They weren't there to protect Tyler, they were there to punish me. Thankfully, justice prevailed. The judge dismissed their claims, stating there was no evidence of any harm caused by my actions. But the damage was done. For weeks afterward, I lay awake at night, replaying every moment of the ordeal. I started relying on sleeping pills just to shut off my racing mind. Still, amid the pain, I realized something important. I had fought back. And though it cost me dearly, I knew I'd never let them control me again. A week after cutting off all contact with my parents and Diane, my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. I hesitated before answering, but something told me to pick up. "Monica, it's Aunt Linda," came the soft, familiar voice. My heart ached at the sound. She'd always been kind to me, even when others weren't. We hadn't spoken much over the years, but her warmth was a constant comfort. After exchanging pleasantries, she got straight to the point. "Honey, your mom called me. She says you've been selfish about Tyler." I sighed, bracing myself for yet another lecture. But then Aunt Linda added, "Before you say anything, let me tell you something you deserve to know. When you were little, just 5 years old, your parents wanted to send you to an orphanage." My breath hitched. "What?" The words felt like a punch to the gut. "They thought they couldn't handle you anymore," she continued gently. But I stepped in. I told them if they went through with it, I'd fight them every step of the way. Tears streamed down my face as I processed this revelation. It wasn't just neglect. They had considered abandoning me entirely. "I'm so sorry you had to find out this way," Aunt Linda whispered, her voice trembling. But now you understand why they've always treated you differently. For a moment, I couldn't speak. All those years of feeling unwanted suddenly made sense. Still, Aunt Linda didn't stop there. I've already talked to some family members, she said firmly. They need to hear the truth about what happened with Tyler and how unfairly you've been treated. Over the next few days, cousins and distant relatives reached out, apologizing for believing my parents' lies. Their support didn't erase the pain, but it helped me see that not everyone in my family was blind to the truth. As the weeks turned into months, my body began to heal, but so did something deeper, my spirit. The physical therapy sessions with Marcus became more than just exercises. They were a testament to my resilience. Every step forward, no matter how small, felt like a victory over the past, the accident, the broken leg, and the emotional wreckage left by my family. By the time summer rolled around, I was walking without a noticeable limp, though rain still brought occasional stiffness. But it wasn't just my leg that had changed. Something inside me had shifted too. I started saying yes to things I'd always wanted to try, but never had the courage or time for when Diane's demands ruled my life. On a whim, I joined a book club that met every Wednesday evening at a cozy cafe downtown. The first meeting was nerve-wracking. I hadn't been part of anything social in years, but as we discussed the night circus, I realized how much I'd missed connecting with people who shared my interests. Then came the cooking class on weekends. Standing in front of a stove again felt surreal, especially after months of struggling even to boil water. Yet here I was, chopping vegetables and kneading dough alongside strangers who quickly became friends. For the first time in forever, I felt alive, truly alive. Dating was another leap I decided to take. After years of putting everyone else's needs before mine, I wondered if I'd even remember how to be vulnerable with someone new. My first date with Alex, a graphic designer I met through mutual friends, was awkward yet endearing. We talked for hours about everything from travel dreams to childhood scars, both literal and metaphorical. He didn't flinch when I told him about my fractured relationship with my family. Instead, he listened intently, his eyes soft with empathy. It wasn't love at first sight, but it was a start, and that was enough. Amid these changes, I began writing again, not for work, but for myself. Late at night, I poured my thoughts into a journal, reflecting on the journey I'd been through. One evening, on a dare from Rachel, I posted an excerpt online. To my surprise, it resonated. Thousands of people reached out, sharing their own stories of familial neglect, betrayal, and heartbreak. Some wrote about being abandoned, others about being compared to siblings or criticized relentlessly. Reading their messages, I felt a strange mix of sadness and hope. Sadness because I knew their pain all too well, and hope because maybe, just maybe, we could find solace in each other. Through this process, I realized something profound. Family isn't defined by blood. True family is the friend who brings you soup when you're sick, the neighbor who carries your groceries upstairs, the coworker who defends you in a meeting. These were the people who showed up for me, not my parents, not Diane. And while the wound of their rejection still lingered, it no longer controlled me. I was Monica, imperfect but healing, finally free to live life on my own terms. Weeks after cutting ties with my family, Aunt Linda called me with unsettling news. "Monica, your mother's been telling everyone you begged for reconciliation, but she refused." I laughed bitterly at the absurdity of it. Me? Begging? After everything they'd put me through? The audacity was staggering. But then again, this was par for the course. Lies had always been their weapon of choice when truth didn't serve them. What hurt more, though, came next. A shocking revelation from a lawyer friend who reviewed some documents for me. Apparently, my parents had sold my childhood home, a property technically still in my name, to fund Diane's renovations. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. That house wasn't just bricks and mortar. It held memories of birthdays, holidays, and quiet moments when I thought maybe, just maybe, I belonged. And now it was gone. All because they couldn't bear to inconvenience themselves or Diane. I hired a lawyer immediately, determined to reclaim what was rightfully mine. The legal battle was exhausting, dredging up old wounds and forcing me to confront years of manipulation. Every email exchange, every court filing, felt like peeling back layers of betrayal I'd tried so hard to bury. But something inside me had changed. Their lies no longer stung as sharply. Their actions, however cruel, couldn't touch the peace I'd fought so hard to build. As I sat across from my lawyer one afternoon, reviewing strategies, I realized something profound. I wasn't fighting for revenge. I was fighting for closure. For the first time, I understood that justice wasn't about punishing them. It was about freeing myself completely. The morning I officially declared myself healed was crisp and clear, the kind of day that felt like a gift from the universe. 6 months had passed since the accident. The broken leg, the fractured relationships, the emotional turmoil. And though my body still carried faint reminders of everything I'd endured, I was ready to mark this day with something symbolic. I chose a small mountain trail near my apartment, one I used to dream of climbing but never dared because life always seemed too busy or chaotic. Armed with my hiking stick and a backpack filled with water, snacks, and a blanket, I set out before dawn. Every step up the winding path was both a challenge and a triumph. My legs still ached slightly in the cold air, but it no longer held me back. As I climbed higher, the world below began to shrink. Cars became tiny specks, buildings mere outlines against the horizon. With each step, I felt lighter, as if the weight of my past struggles was being left behind. When I finally reached the summit, breathless and exhilarated, the first rays of sunlight broke over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and pink. Tears welled up in my eyes, not from sadness, but from an overwhelming sense of freedom. This moment wasn't just about physical recovery. It was about reclaiming my life. For so long, I'd allowed others, my parents, Diane, even societal expectations, to dictate who I should be and how I should live. But now, standing on that peak, I realized I had the power to define my own boundaries, to choose who deserved space in my heart and mind. The journey hadn't been easy. There were days when the pain, both physical and emotional, felt unbearable, nights when the silence of my empty apartment echoed louder than any argument with my family. Yet, those dark moments had taught me resilience. They forced me to confront truths I'd buried for years, that I didn't need validation from people who refused to see me, that love shouldn't come with conditions, and that sometimes, breaking is the only way to heal. As I sat there, wrapped in my blanket, watching the sun rise fully into view, I thought about all the people who had shown up for me during my lowest points. Rachel, Jess, Aunt Linda, even strangers like Mr. Chun and Alicia. Their kindness reminded me that true family isn't determined by bloodlines, but by actions. And while my biological family might never understand or accept me, their opinions no longer mattered. What mattered was the peace I'd found within myself, a peace born from setting boundaries, embracing vulnerability, and choosing joy over obligation. I took a deep breath, letting the cool mountain air fill my lungs. "Thank you," I whispered, not sure if I was thanking the universe, my friends, or simply my own determination. Whatever it was, I knew one thing for certain. I was free. Free to live life on my terms, imperfect yet whole. Sometimes, we have to break completely before we can rebuild stronger. And sometimes, the hardest journeys lead us to the most beautiful destinations.